This is Brian Denzer. I'm the data manager for the Hurricane Isaac Disaster Case Management Program. What I'd like to offer you today is a set of tips and tricks for using Microsoft Excel, an Excel 101 tutorial to perhaps help you more efficiently work with Microsoft Excel to manipulate data files that you might have, for example, downloaded from the CAN database. Let's take a look at a couple of files just to begin. I want to mention that it used to be the case that when you downloaded data from the CAN database, it used to be provided to you in this format. You'd get a file that looked like this. It would be named fb_export.txt.zip, a .zip file, a compressed file. And when you would open the thing up, you'd get a file inside the zip file that was the same name, basically, just without the zip extension. And I would point out to you, if I drag the file out of the zip file and just drag it here to the folder, I can open this up using a text editor application that I like to use, Notepad++. When I open that up, it shows me as symbols the tab characters that divide the columns. In fact, it used to be that CAN provided tab delimited data. This is no longer the case. Let me close this. We now get CSV files. Okay, so we don't need this anymore. I'm going to delete these files. Let's take a look at this CSV zip file. Let's double-click the zip file to open up the zip file window, and let's get that CSV file out of there. We point out that you can get that file out of there a couple of different ways. One way would be to click this link for extract all files, which opens up this little wizard, which is a lot of extra effort actually. Just as I did a minute ago, just grab that file and drag it into the folder. Okay, it is necessary for you to do that. You're going to have to drag the file out of the folder to actually use it, because you can't really do anything with it while it's inside that zip file folder here. So let's close that. Here's our file, our CSV file. A CSV file is a comma-separated value file. Before I go any further, I want to rename this file. I typically name the file something that helps me remember what it was I was doing when I downloaded it. In this case, it is a CAN type file, so I sometimes put CAN in the name. I know that this contains recovery plans and that I'm using it for training. So I'm going to put those things in the file name, and I often put a date in the file name as well, just so I know when it was that I downloaded the file. In this case, a 4-digit year, 2013, 2-digit month, 06, 2-digit day, 23. Okay, if I actually open this up with Notepad++, just like I did with the tab file a minute ago, you'll see now that the tabs have been replaced with commas. Okay, each column has a column has a comma that defines the column. So that's all that a CSV file is. It's a comma-separated value file. Now you'll notice as well that in my environment here, it is automatically detecting that Microsoft Excel knows how to read this file. In fact, if I hover over the file, it tells me that it's a Microsoft Excel comma-separated value file. These aren't all necessarily, they aren't exclusively Microsoft Excel files. There are other applications that can work with CSV files. It's just that my computer environment has associated itself to use Microsoft Excel anytime it sees one of these CSV files. You'll also see that the little icon for the file, the graphic, looks like an Excel spreadsheet icon. Now, let's imagine that I'm going to break this temporarily. Let's imagine that you try to open this file and you just get Notepad, okay? That's not very useful. You can't really do much with that data. I mean, you can see what it looks like. You see that there are columns there, but you really want to get that thing into Microsoft Excel. And notwithstanding the fact that even though I broke it, it looks like the graphic still associates it, this CSV file with Microsoft Excel, it's only opening it in Notepad. Okay, so this is a problem. So if you have that problem, it's pretty simple to fix this. Just right-click, and you'll see that you get a menu of different options. What you want to do is look for Open With. Here's your option. And in fact, I could just go to Microsoft Excel right here, but that's not going to permanently fix my problem. I'm going to have to do this every single time until I fix the real problem, which you'll see as soon as I close that. Okay, so I had Excel open, but now when I double click this, look, it's back to Notepad. Okay, so what you want to do is right click, choose Open With. Don't go to Excel, go down here. Go down here where it says Choose Program. And we're looking for a little checkbox. See that checkbox there? Always use the selected program to open this kind of file. Look up here, you have a bunch of different kinds of programs that you could use. Microsoft Excel is listed, but if you didn't see it listed, you could browse to Program Files on your C drive, browse to your Microsoft Office environment. You have to dig around a little bit. I know where it is, but there's the Excel application. Let me cancel that. Typically you're just going to find Microsoft Excel listed. Then check that checkbox. Always use the selected program to open this kind of file. Then say OK. Okay, so Microsoft Excel is opening up the file. Great. Let me close that. Now let's see if it's actually permanently associated. This time I'm just going to double click the file. There it goes. So now we don't have to worry about right-clicking this file and choosing to open it in Microsoft Excel. It's permanently associated with Microsoft Excel. Okay, so you get a bunch of data here, right? It's all like this column here. It looks like a bunch of pound symbols. Kind of hard to read. You see here something where the text is clipped off. The very first thing you probably want to do with your data is expand these columns, right? So you can do it one at a time, right? But that's kind of tedious, especially if you have, 20, 30 columns up here. That's going to be a little tedious. What you probably really want to do is just click. Here's a quick trick. Just click right up here, this upper left-hand box. You see those little arrow there? And as you move the mouse in there, it turns to a plus symbol. Click that box. You'll see everything highlighted. And what I commonly do almost every single time, it's almost the first thing I do, is just go up there, click that square, highlight the entire spreadsheet, and then I do this. I manually drag a column out. And when I do that with everything selected in the spreadsheet, all of the columns do the same thing. Let's do that again. Notice how as I move the cursor across these columns, it changes from an arrow to this weird little line with an arrow on the left and right. And it's a down arrow, then a little line with a left and right arrow on it, right? It's that little arrow that you want to use. It doesn't matter which columns you choose. You can go between the C and the D or the D and the E. Just double click. When you see that little icon between those two columns, just double click and your columns will automatically expand. I typically, if I'm working with a large number of columns and rows, sometimes the rows will be expanded like this. And what that's telling me is that there's a cell that has a lot of text in it. And in order to squeeze the text in, the rows have expanded vertically to allow space so that you can read the data. So what I typically do is I highlight everything and I manually drag the columns way out. Then I minimize the rows just by double-clicking in between any two rows. Same concept as up here with the columns, right? It's just that it's flipped to a vertical axis, right? You see the arrow, and as you go between two rows, you see a line with this time an up and down arrow, then the row is highlighted and that line reappears. So in between any two rows is where you want to double click to minimize the rows, and then when you've done that you can go back up here and minimize the columns. It's something you don't want to play with, but just clicking that little square in the upper left hand corner to reformat the dimensions of your rows and columns is a really handy device. Now I will show you some more formatting tricks, I think, a little bit later. What I want to jump into right here is some really basic sorting and filtering features in Microsoft Excel to help you very quickly do useful things with your data. So notice that we've got client ID up here, date of intake, case manager agency name, case manager last name, goal 1, goal 2, goal 3. You'll also see there's some errors in goal 1. Goal 1 is only supposed to have the number 1 entered if repair is the goal. Same with goal 2. You're only supposed to see the value number 2 if the goal was rebuild. And for goal 3, long-term rental, we'll see more of those errors further down here where people have entered odd things that might be, I'm not sure what that is in fact. So anyway, there are some problems with this data that we might want to search for. And so let's do some things with our spreadsheet. The first thing you might want to do is sort your data, right? So if we wanted to sort by, say, client ID, see how these are all sort of out of order? You might want the client IDs sorted. I'm not sure what the use case would be, but let's go from the Home tab over here to the Data tab. The Data tab exposes some useful sort and filter tools, all found right up here. Okay. The simplest thing you can do is just click that Sort A to Z button, right? When you click that, now the client IDs are all sorted from smallest to largest. You can, of course, click the Z to A button to sort them the other way, from largest to smallest. Notice that when we sort by client ID, we get a jumble of different case manager agency names. Let's say that you were interested in sorting by agency name and then sorting by client ID. Okay, so you want to, the reason you would sort is to cluster all of the agencies together. So let's say we were particularly interested in HARC LSSDR. So let's go ahead and sort. We're not going to use the single sort button anymore. We're going to use this multi-sort button. Okay, when you click that guy, you get this dialog that opens up, and automatically, notice, a whole bunch of records get highlighted, okay? Except for the top row, the header row, the column names, those aren't highlighted. And in fact, there's a little checkbox over here in the right-hand corner that says, My data has headers. A header is a column name. If you check or uncheck that box, you'll see that that top row gets highlighted and unhighlighted. If I did it like this, if I did not check that checkbox for my data has headers, and you try to sort, you'll notice that your column headings, the column names, they'll actually get sorted. They'll disappear and they'll end up in your data somewhere in the middle, most likely, where you can't find it. So that's why that checkbox is important. Notice as well that you get a row, a sort row, and chooses actually just the first column that's available for you. You'll see that little drop-down box presents to you all of the columns that are available in your data. In this case, client ID is in fact the one we want to use on, that we want to sort on. We want to sort on values. You could sort on other things, but typically you're going to choose values. And in this case, we want to sort from smallest to largest. Okay. Now choose OK. Click the button. You'll see that client ID is now sorted. Okay. But our problem was we wanted to sort by agency name and then by client ID. So let's open up the multi-sort dialog again and change this column from client ID to case manager agency name. Okay, so we want to sort first by case manager agency name so that all of those things will cluster, and in this case we'll just leave it A to Z. We could go Z to A. Let's go Z to A just to make it interesting. Now, how are we going to sort by client ID? Well, let's do this. Let's add a level. Click that button. You'll see get another row. It says sort by case manager agency name, then by what? Sort by client ID. In this case, sort on values smallest to largest. So now what we should see are case manager agencies sorted in reverse order from Z to A, with the client IDs sorted smallest to largest. So let's click OK, and look, sure enough, HARC track is the topmost set of records, and we should now see that the client ID is sorted from smallest to largest, and in fact it is. So if you wanted to, you could go down here, just cruise down, and find the grouping of LSSDR records. There they are. And say you wanted to do something with those records, you could just keep cruising down here, and maybe you want to highlight them, add a little fill color. Let's go back to the Home tab here and click this little button here for fill color. Okay, so they're now all green. It's maybe kind of hard to see, but those LSSDR records are now all green. Looks like I missed one there. Okay, so that's something you might do. That might be useful to you. Let's remove that fill color. Actually, let me highlight all the records. I'm going to use that handy little box in the upper left-hand corner again and choose no fill to empty color from all of the cells in my spreadsheet. Okay. So that's kind of a useful exercise. Sorting is helpful sometimes, but you probably want something a little more powerful. So let's go to something much more powerful. Let's use the filter button. This is an auto filter button. As soon as you click that, you'll notice that you get these little drop-down arrows next to all of your column names. The column names are slightly obscured, so you might want to expand them. Let's use that trick again. Let's highlight the entire spreadsheet. Let's double-click between any two columns, and now you see a little bit more of the column names. This filter button is incredibly powerful. Let's say you want to find all those LSSDR records. And you click that drop-down arrow. Notice that there are a couple of things available to you. You can sort A to Z, right? So that, just like that single sort button up here, you get that option available in the filter tool. You can also use text filters. We'll do maybe one or two of these to show you how those work. But you'll probably most often, there's also the search button, but you'll probably most often just use these checkboxes. Notice that as I click the select all checkbox, the entire set of values is turned on and off. If you want to only filter on HARC LSSDR, you just want that checkbox selected and then say OK. There we go. There's all our LSSDR records. Notice that the row numbers have jumped from 1 to 197, and the other records have not disappeared. They are just hidden from view. And as I scroll down, we see that there are no other records displayed except for the LSSDR records. And it looks like, oh, well, we actually don't know how many records there are by looking at the row numbers, but if I look down here, in that lower left-hand corner, I see that there are 84 of 965 records found. So there are presumably 84 LSSDR records in this data set. Notice as well that a little filter icon has now appeared in that little drop-down box graphic. Okay, and we now can clear this filter if we want to see all of the records again. You can also click this clear button up here in the sort and filter menu right here. Either one will work. Now we're back to seeing all of the records. Let's say that you want to not only filter on agency name, but you also want to filter by a particular case manager. Okay, let's do that again. Click the Select All button and choose LSSDR. Or you could just type LSSDR and filter that way. Okay, so there's all our LSSDR records. We could, if we want to, sort for case manager name. We see that Arnold, Conzenere, Methvin, O'Quinn, and Palmer are the case managers for LSSDR. You could click any one of them or two of them if you wanted to and filter. Let's filter for Conzenere, and there you go. Okay, let's clear that filter. This time let's try a different filter method. Let's choose a text filter. Let's say you want to find last name equals Arnold. There you get all the Arnold records. That's using the text filter option. You could also choose begins with. In this case I could type Methva to get all the Methvin records. Okay, let me clear that filter. So a lot of different ways to filter your records. I'm going to clear that filter as well, and we're back to seeing all of the records presented to us. So you've got some really powerful ways to filter your records. And let's try a special case filter. Let's search for a particular case manager. Actually, let's go back to our agency name filter. Let's choose HIRC CCANO. Let's filter for a particular case manager. In this case, let's go for Nicholas and say OK. Now we're seeing all the Nicholas records, and we see some problems. Okay, so we know that when data entry people and case managers enter a goal into goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, there's a particular way for coding that a client wants, or a client has chosen a particular goal. In this case, if repair is the goal, home repair is the goal, it gets entered into goal 1, and the proper way to enter is using the value 1. Now this is a very minor problem, except that, I mean, you see that this case manager has actually entered home needs repair, which is correct. That's what the client wants, and it's going into goal 1, and we could say that this is satisfactory. The problem is that there has been no convention for doing that. Sometimes it's entered as home needs repair, sometimes home repairs. This one says home needs repair. The garden variety of ways to enter that need or that goal makes it very difficult across a few dozen people to filter those records, which is why the convention that we want is for data entry people to enter the value 1. Only number 1 should be entered. And just by doing this filter for this case manager, we can very quickly see a problem that can be fixed, and can be fixed very easily actually, just by providing this list to that case manager with client IDs, and printing this list. You might print it, you could email it, and showing that case manager these problems. Let's say you wanted to only show the records that have a problem. Okay, what you could do is filter for all the records that don't have the value 1. So let's use that text filter again. Like you could play with these, right, and just click these values. But if you have a lot of records, that might not work for you. So let's use a text filter and choose does not equal 1. And look, we get, there was one record that was correct, And now we have a bunch of blanks. So let's see if we can filter to get rid of the blanks. Okay, so here's our text filter options, and in fact there's a little thing here for blanks. Let's try a does not contain filter. So there are different ways you can do this, but notice that all of these values say repair in them. So let's type the word repair. Does not contain repair. Or actually, what we want are the ones that say repair. So let's say contains repair and choose OK. There we go. Here are the records that need to be fixed. Now you could send this list to Case Manager Nicholas and have those problems addressed. Okay. There is one other kind of filter that I want to show, and that is the advanced filter. So let's clear this filter to see all of our records presented again. Okay. I'm going to use this advanced filter here. Okay, but before we do, there are a couple of things you want to set up. First of all, we're going to want to create some extra rows, some blank rows at the very top of our page, but not quite completely at the top. We want those blank rows to be just underneath the header row. Let me turn off the auto filter. Okay, get rid of those drop-down arrows. I'm going to highlight row 2. I'm going to go back here to the Home tab. I'm going to choose this Insert Rows button. Okay, I'm going to click that once, twice, 3 times. Now we have 3 blank rows at the top of our spreadsheet and just underneath the header row. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is type in some values. Let's say that you want to find all of the let's pick a name here. Let's say that you want to find all of the I'm looking for I know the name that I'm looking for. I'm looking for the name Narvaez. So, not to pick on Narvaez, but just a different name to work with. If I type the word Narvaez up here in this row, it stays there, and it looks like it's a value. Okay, that's not actually what we're looking for. What we want to do is create a formula in this cell. What we want to do is create a filter where case manager last name, in this case, equals, okay, so you type the equal symbol, Narvaez, okay. Now watch what happens when I tab off. It's going to create an error. I'm doing this intentionally so that you understand how to use this properly. See how it says pound name question mark? That's an Excel error. The problem is that when you type an equals symbol, Excel is actually waiting for a formula. This would be like a count or a sum or some other formula, maybe adding 2 different cells together. That's what the equals symbol typically means. Now, when you use the advanced filter, this will seem confusing. What you want to do is tell Excel, aha, you know what? Actually, I'm not creating a formula. I'm creating a filter. So what you do is you type, here's the trick, you type a single quotation mark in front of the equals sign. Okay? Now watch what happens when I click Enter. Okay? Now see how it says equals Narvaez? That is a proper filter. Case manager last name equals Narvaez. Okay? Now watch what happens. This is how this works. You actually don't have to highlight all the records, but I just kind of do as a matter of practice. I'm going to click that upper left-hand square, just like that, highlight all the records, and go back to the Data tab, choose Advanced Filter, and you have to follow this exactly like it is. Notice how, by default, Microsoft Excel is choosing for the very first row here, something called the list range. It's actually choosing all of the records. Okay? I'll show you that that is the default every time in just a minute. What's important and what you need to do is enter this criteria range. The criteria range is what we just typed, right? Case manager last name equals Narvaez. And that criteria appears in row 1 and row 2. So for your criteria range, you're going to want to choose row 1 and row 2. Now, click that little arrow. The arrow button allows you to dynamically select something on the spreadsheet. So click that. See how the advanced filter criteria text box opens for you, and you can now choose by clicking the rows and dragging the mouse down. You can choose rows 1 and row 2. Now click that little button again, the little arrow button, and you'll see that you have chosen a criteria range. In this tab, Canned Training Recovery Plans 2013, exclamation point, $1, $2. You don't want to have to type that. That's a kind of a difficult thing to learn how to do, which is why that little arrow button is helpful to you. We've now created an advanced filter that will filter these records. If I choose OK, the records filter. See? These are all Narvaez records. Okay? Now we can get even more sophisticated than that. Let's clear the filter right here. Okay? Our filter criteria is still there. Let's say that we want to find all of the Goal 2 records that Narvaez has entered. Okay? So here, let's enter another filter in here for Goal 2. How are we going to do that? Well, up here in the formula bar, remember, there's that little trick. You can't just type the equals symbol because that'll create an error, right? Equals 2. Okay, well, in this case, not only didn't give us an error, it actually thinks that the value we want is 2, but we want it to look like this. We want that equals symbol there. So what are we going to do? First, you're going to start with a little single quotation mark, then type equals, and actually what that single quotation mark tells Excel is, hey, wait, I'm not typing a formula. It tells Excel, hey, this is going to be something that I want to appear in that cell as text. I actually want that equal symbol to look like text in that symbol. That's what that single quotation mark does for you. Now type the number 2. There we go. Here's a criteria. Goal 2 equals 2. Now, if I choose Advanced Filter without clicking all the records, I get a little error, okay? It says, hey, if you want the first row of the selection or list used as labels and not as data, click OK. What's going on here? Microsoft Excel is having a little trouble understanding that the column header actually contains column names. Part of the problem, I suspect, is that there's a couple of weird symbols. Like typically in a column heading, you don't want slash symbols. In fact, you often don't want spaces. Really, a proper column heading is a set of values that are just alpha characters. Alpha or numeric characters are okay as well. Usually no spaces and no weird symbols. Okay, so I think that's what's going on here. But don't worry, just say okay, because you know that the column headers are in fact column names and should be used in your filter criteria. So you're going to say okay, because if it says here, if you want the first row of the selection or list used as labels and not as data, click OK. So that first row is not data, these are labels, so say OK. So you're fine. Okay, so actually this did not do what I thought it was going to do, which is okay. Let's cancel. Let's go back and do what we did before. So I had the right idea the first time. Click that upper left-hand box to highlight everything on the page. Click the advanced filter. Same problem. Doesn't know what to do with the column labels. Say OK. There we go. That looks better. It's like I actually don't mind that an error like that pops up because it may help you in the future troubleshoot something. Notice that the proper list range, what that actually looks like, is starting at cell A1 and going all the way down to column G, row 969. And you know column G is the last column, and actually 969 is the last row. So you want all of the records selected to filter. Your criteria range, well, it's actually giving you row 1 and 2. It's retaining row 1 and 2 from the last filter. But if you want to be sure, you can still click that arrow button and choose row 1 and 2. Did it choose them? Let's try again and see. Okay, so that's a little troubling to me. I want to delete that. Let's try this again. Let's choose our criteria range, row 1 and 2. Okay, so I don't like the looks of that, but I'm going to say OK anyway and see what happens. Okay, so we got nothing. That doesn't mean that there's an error. It may be that in fact Narvaez doesn't have any goal 2 records. Let's clear the filter. Okay, let's just cruise down and take a look. Oh, there are some. Oh no, there aren't. Let's back up a little bit. Okay, let's just use our filter for Narvaez. Let's click all the records. Advanced, say OK. Got the right list range. Criteria range looks OK. Let's just reset it. Okay, let's say OK. There we go, there's Narvaez. Does Narvaez have any goal 2 records? Aha, no. So, in fact, the filter worked for us. Let's filter then for, say, goal 3, long-term rental. Let's grab those records. Clear the filter. Scroll back up to the top. Here's our filter criteria. Let's filter for goal 3. Okay. What's the filter? What's the way we enter the filter? Start with a single quotation mark, telling Excel, hey, everything that comes after this is going to be text, not a formula. So that Excel understands that when we type this equals symbol right there, this is not a formula, this is a filter. Okay? Equals 3. Goal 3 equals 3. So we should now get all the Narvaez records where the goal is goal 3. Highlight all the records, choose advanced. Here's that error, just say OK. Here's our criteria range. I trust that that's right, but I'm actually going to delete it and reselect because I'm kind of curious if this is going to work. So let's run it. Say OK. Aha, there we go. Narvaez records where a client has chosen goal 3, long-term rental. Okay? Pretty handy stuff. I really like this advanced filter option. It's just about the closest thing you're going to get to working with a kind of database query. Let's clear this, and I'll show you one additional trick. Let's get rid of goal 3. Let's this time search for HARC track records. So we're going to change our filter criteria. Go over here to Case Manager Agency Name, choose equals, what are we supposed to type first? That's right, single apostrophe. Type the equals symbol, and then type HARC track. Okay, so now we're going to get all the track records. Let's make sure that we get all the track records that are goal 1. So for a filter, we're going to type what? Single apostrophe equals what? What's the value we want to type in there? 1. click return. Okay. Case manager agency name equals HIRC track, goal 1 equals 1. We're going to do something really special here. We're actually going to filter these records and create a new record set, okay, using the advanced filter. Highlight all the records, choose advanced filter, ignore that error, say OK. We've selected all the records that we want. This criteria range is going to work for us, but here's what I want to show you. Instead of filtering the list in place, I'm going to choose this button here, copy to another location. And look, as soon as I click that, it says copy to where? Okay. This gives you an opportunity to copy your filter selection to a new record set, and you can just use the same arrow button here to dynamically choose where you want these records to go. Okay. Now, you're going to have to do it, I don't know any other way to do it, but to copy the records to the same spreadsheet. So we're going to find an empty space here on this worksheet where we can copy these records to. I'm going to click the arrow button, and I know, see, I can move around the spreadsheet here. I know that here after goal 3 there's some empty space. So I'm going to choose right there, row 1, column H, to copy these records to that area. Now, click the arrow button to return to the filter dialog and choose OK. Okay, let's take a look, see what happened. Aha, look at this. Okay, look, these are all HIRC track records. They're all goal 1. Okay, it's kind of hard to read, right? Why? Because all these columns are really wide. So let's use this trick that we learned earlier of minimizing these columns by double-clicking between them, so that we now get over here, look, here's all these goal 1 records. This is something really powerful. Okay, it makes it possible for you to very quickly, especially if you save your filter criteria in a spreadsheet, it makes it really easy for you to very quickly create new record sets. You could do this for your agency, you could do it for a case manager, you could do it for particular goals. There are a variety of things where this might be handy, and now what I can do is actually just sort of grab all of these records. We had to filter onto this spreadsheet, but now it's no problem at all to just sort of use a keyboard shortcut, Control X on the keyboard, to cut these records. Go over here, create a new worksheet, and now Control V shortcut to paste the records into this spreadsheet. Look, I'm going to highlight, expand these, and look, here are our goal 1 clients for HIRC track. Okay, let's say now that you wanted to print this, and this will be the last thing that we cover. Let's go into print preview mode just to see what it looks like right now. Okay, I'm going to click print, and it gives us this little preview mode here, right? It looks like there's no lines between any of the cells, which might make it hard to read, and there's more than one page. See, so let's look at the next page, and it looks like actually the columns actually go onto a new page, which is going to be kind of a mess when we print this, I think. So we want to do a couple of things to format this a little nicer. Let's get out of print preview mode and go back to the home tab. A couple of things we can do. Let's go to page. Well, first let's do something that I like to do. First of all, I don't like to use borders. I really don't like borders. There's another trick that we're going to use. That doesn't mean that people shouldn't, but there's another trick we're going to use. I typically like to do this. I like to make the header row look a little different. So I'll bold the font. I'm going to choose another color for the background, but I don't like obnoxious colors. I like pretty subtle colors. So I'm going to choose, in this case, a dark gray color, but not black. I'm going to change the font color to white. Okay, so that looks pretty good. That white on gray stands out pretty strongly. We know here that there is a page break right here at this little dashed line that appears. Once you go into print preview mode, Excel is going to drop that little dashed line in there wherever the page breaks. So let's change the orientation of the page so that we can squeeze more columns into the page. Let's use this page layout tab, and here there's a quick access to the page orientation. Let's change to landscape. Notice how now the page break has moved over. So now we're actually getting everything onto one page. Great. Let's go to print preview, and actually I'm not going to go through the dialog this time, okay, because I have this little print preview button that I created up here, and I got that just by right clicking. Excuse me, it shows this little arrow drop down button here, and I chose more commands, and here it should be listed in popular commands. It would be here, print preview, and you just click add and it'll appear over here. Just like, let's say I choose quick print, click add, see how quick print is there, and it is going to show up there if I say OK. But that's how I got that, and you would just say OK. If you don't see print preview, just change this drop down box to show all commands, and then everything available in the universe of Microsoft Excel shows up. Okay, you would then say OK, and you'd get this print preview button. But it's just a really economical way to sort of get a quick glance at what your page looks like. So this looks pretty good. In fact, it looks like all the records appear on this page, but we might want some lines between the cells. So let's go back out here to page layout. I'm going to show you another little trick that I really like. Remember I said that I don't like using borders. Okay, I like this. See how when I go down here in the page setup area, there's a little arrow in the corner there. I'm going to click that arrow, and I get this little page setup dialog. In fact, this page setup dialog looks a lot like the dialog that appears in print preview, but some of the functionality is grayed out in print preview, so that you have to go through this page setup dialog inside of Excel to actually do what I'm about to show you. I'm going to click this little button here, grid lines, print grid lines. And I can now actually print preview using this button to get a quick look. And there we go, look. See, without even adding any borders, I have a grid that prints around every single cell. Pretty handy. It's a lot easier to use that than to put borders around the cells. Let's go back to page layout. And this guy's pretty much ready to go. I could actually print this on one page and, I don't know, maybe give it to all the case managers who have clients with Goal 1 repair. Okay. What I want to do finally is show you a very special problem. And that is this. Let's say you have a huge amount of data. Okay. I'm going to close down these filters. I'm going to delete them because they would actually print. I want to delete these rows. Okay, we're actually back here to the original spreadsheet. Let's say you wanted to print everything that you downloaded from CAN. I can't imagine you'd want to do that, but let me just show you why. Let me just show you what happens and why you can do some formatting changes to help you with your printing problem. Let's do print preview. Let's see what this looks like. We're back to the same problem, right? It's in portrait mode. There are no lines around any of the cells. There's a lot of wasted space. Look at all that white space there, right? And it's all due to the fact that this column header has a really long name. Also, the dates have extraneous time information on them that we don't need. And as I scroll through these pages, look, we actually lose the column heading, and it's actually 42 pages. Okay, so you really probably would not want to print something like this, but let me just show you some tricks to help you format this page. Okay, let's go to page layout. First of all, we know we're going to change the orientation landscape. We learned that. We can minimize the margins, which is, we want to use as much of the page as we possibly can. So in this case, we want left margins at 0.25, right margins at 0.25, a very small header and footer, and the very small top and bottom margins as well. I'm also going to choose a legal size piece of paper. So we're going to have a landscape legal size piece of paper, a very wide piece of paper, 14 inches. Okay. I want to fix some of these columns. In fact, my own personal preference is not to have any spaces in any columns. I also like to make, as much as possible, small column names that are still meaningful. So intake date is actually a lot shorter than date of intake / date case opened, and we still understand what it means, right? So that now, if I minimize the columns, we're saving a lot of real estate. And I'm just going to keep doing this. We could say case, we could use some abbreviations, case manager agency, and instead of name, we could just say case manager agency. We know what name means, and look, we've eliminated a lot more space. The case manager last name, that could be abbreviated a little bit to shrink that column. Okay. Goal 1, there's not much you're going to get by modifying that, but you could take the spaces out at least. Goal 1, Goal 2, Goal 3. And let's minimize these columns again. And they're not minimizing very much. And why is that? Well, actually, because as you scroll down here, Microsoft Excel is choosing to retain that width in order to make that text fit. Now, if you have really huge text, huge bodies of text, you can do something called wrap text, where you highlight the column and here in the Home tab, you can choose this wrap text option, so that now if you really try to manually close that column up and get it really tight, you scroll down and take a look at what it did to your text. Okay, look, it only says home, but the value is still there. It just doesn't read right. So what you can do now is actually maximize your rows. Okay, and look, it has retained the column width, but it has increased the size of the rows so that the text in that column can now be read in its entirety. Okay, so just a little bitty trick there that helps you create a document that will print a little bit nicer. And I also want to do something with this intake date. Notice we want to get rid of those zeros in the time. So I'm going to change the format from general to short date. Notice how all that appears now is the month, day, and year. I can now minimize column B even further by double-clicking that column. Okay. We have a pretty good looking document here. I have not actually saved this. I should have saved this a long time ago. I'm going to choose save. And it's asking me if I want to keep this in a CSV format. And actually I don't. I want this to be an Excel document, so I choose no and choose Excel workbook. I should have done this like step 1 actually, but so far so good. We're okay. Let's go to print preview. Okay, so we're really maximizing our space here. In fact, we probably don't even need a legal-sized page. There's still 29 pages, and as I cursor through, this looks pretty good. The only thing is, look, there's that home needs repair value. The only thing is we probably want to put a grid around the cells. So what did we do before? Well, if I go to page setup here, this will confuse you. You go to sheet. Well, grid lines is fine. You can choose that. Cool, that works. Here's what I want to do. I want to get the column names at the top here. That part is grayed out. If I go to page setup here, I would want to use it here, but it's grayed out. See, rows to repeat at top will give you the column names at the top of each column, but it's grayed out. So how do we get that? We can't actually do it here in print preview mode. The grid worked fine. I was wrong about that, but let's go to page layout. Choose that little drop-down arrow there. See? Okay. And go to sheet, the sheet tab. Now it's not grayed out. Okay, so rows to repeat at top. Let's say you want to print the column header at the top of every page. Click that arrow. Choose the first row. Rows to repeat at top, criteria, and say OK. Now when you go to print preview, watch what happens. Let's cursor through the pages. Look, every page now has the column heading on it, which makes it a lot easier to read, especially if you have a lot of pages. Okay, you can actually do the same thing with the. You can have rows repeating if you. It's something you can explore in the future. I can answer that question personally, I guess, and go through that if you have that problem where, for example, you may want the client ID to appear on every page if you have, a gazillion columns that go out here. So that looks pretty good, and it looks like it's pretty ready to print. You might want to go to the Insert tab and say put a header or footer in there. You might want to, for example, click the footer down here on the right-hand side and insert, say, the number of pages. Over here on the left-hand side, you might want to put the file name or the file path. Here in the middle, you might want to put, say, the current date. And actually, you can change the font size for these things by going out here to the Home tab and changing these. You probably want a smaller font for your footer. Okay, like 8-point font is pretty good. And let's go back to Home. And this looks pretty good. Let's go to Print Preview. Here's our document. That looks pretty good. You could print this and distribute it. That's about all I have for the Excel tutorial. I hope that's helpful, and I'm happy to answer questions in the future or do another one of these. Thanks for your attention. Again, this is Brian Denzer. I'm the data manager for the Hurricane Isaac Disaster Case Management Program.